lousy three-point shooter his whole career, a notoriously poor free throw shooter, a liability at the late game, close game free throw line. Nobody has missed more late game, close game, last second shots than LeBron since he entered the league, or late game, close game free throws than LeBron since he entered the league. I don't see a closer gene. I don't see a clutch gene. I see a phony goat. And by the way, the other night,
Richie Guerin just said what nobody in basketball dared to say out loud. LeBron James didn't build a legacy, he engineered one. And this isn't some talking head running his mouth for clout on a late-night podcast. This is a man who has been inside this game for over 6 decades. A man who played, coached, and watched this sport evolve from the ground up. Someone who has seen real greatness, up close, unfiltered, and without a PR team standing in the way. What Richie Guerin said in 2025 didn't just raise eyebrows. It cracked the basketball world straight down the middle. Because if even half of what he's saying is true, then everything you thought you knew about LeBron James, his rings, his records, and his so-called legacy, deserves a second look. Stay with me, because this story goes deeper than
Go ahead, Shaq. They play like OKC. Everybody knows their roles. They play together. This was a very solid team, like I said last week. The system is back, and they defend. The system is back. I still think they need one more big-name player. They don't have that now. Do I have confidence in Spurs? Yes, I do. They're playing very well.
You saw that graphic on the 37 blocks since the All-Star break. But that's more than 14 teams have since the All-Star break.
But the one issue, Victor has to play great because he has to play like. Who doesn't have to play
Here's
great?
the thing about Richie Guerin that most people under 40 don't fully appreciate. This isn't someone trying to build a brand or stay relevant on social media. He doesn't have a podcast to promote. He doesn't need the clicks. Guerin is old school in the truest sense of the word. He came up in an era where basketball was raw. No load management, no super teams orchestrated through back-channel text messages, no media training before press conferences. You played, you competed, you let the game do the talking. And when your career was done, you faded into the background with your dignity intact. So when a man like that decides to open his mouth in 2025 and go after the most famous basketball player on the planet, people listen, and they should listen. Guerin had kept quiet for years. People close to him say he'd been watching LeBron's rise with a kind of uncomfortable silence. Not jealousy, not bitterness, something closer to frustration. The frustration of a man who knows what real legacy looks like and keeps watching the world hand that word to someone he believes hasn't truly earned it, at least not in the way the history books are going to record it. And then, in early 2025, something changed. Something pushed him to finally speak. And what came out of his mouth? This is the part that nobody in mainstream media wants to touch right now.
The answer to the question everybody wants to know. LeBron, what's your decision?
In this fall, man, this is very tough. In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
Miami Heat. That was the conclusion you woke up with this morning.
That was the conclusion I woke up with this morning.
Why?
Like I said before, I feel like it's going to give me the best opportunity to win and to win for multiple years.
Guerin didn't mince words. He called LeBron James a fraud. Not a bad player, not an overrated star, a fraud. Someone who, in Guerin's own words, manufactured his entire legacy from the beginning. And before you close this video thinking that's just an old man being bitter, hear out exactly what he means, because the argument is more specific and more damaging than just a hot take. Guerin's core claim is this: LeBron James never let the game define him. He defined the game around himself. Every major move in LeBron's career, every team change, every dramatic moment was carefully calculated to protect his image and pad his resume. And the media, the very outlets that were supposed to hold athletes accountable, became willing participants in the operation. Think about it. Every time LeBron made a move that raised questions, the narrative was already written before the press conference. every time he underperformed in a big moment, there was a storyline ready to redirect the conversation. Guerin says this didn't happen by accident. He says LeBron's camp built one of the most sophisticated image control machines in the history of professional sports and used it to turn a complicated, sometimes flawed career into an untouchable mythology. He didn't just play the game, Guerin reportedly said in a private conversation that leaked to a small basketball forum in March 2025 before being taken down within hours. He produced it, like a movie, and everyone around him was cast to make him look like the hero. The fact that it was scrubbed so fast, that alone tells you something. And here's where it gets really interesting, because Guerin isn't the only one who's been thinking this. He's just the first one with the credibility and the nerve to say it this loudly.
Let's be honest with each other for a second. If you've followed LeBron's career with even a slightly critical eye, you've probably noticed some things that never quite added up. The way his departure from certain teams was always framed as a noble sacrifice, rather than a calculated chess move. The way his finals losses were consistently explained away, while his wins were celebrated as individual genius. The way players around him, guys who had their own careers, their own legacies, suddenly became supporting characters in his story, whether they agreed to that role or not. Guerin points to a pattern. He says that across LeBron's entire career, you can trace a very deliberate strategy of surrounding himself with the right talent at the right time, in the right market, with the right media access. And then, and this is the key part, making sure that when things went wrong, the story never stuck to him. This isn't just about basketball decisions. Guerin is talking about something bigger. He's talking about the construction of an identity. LeBron positioned himself as the activist, the businessman, the family man, the mentor, and every single one of those identities served a purpose beyond the court. They made him harder to criticize. They made every attack on his game look like an attack on something more than basketball. And look, that's smart. Nobody's saying it isn't smart. But Guerin's point is that smart isn't the same as great. Calculated isn't the same as legendary. And somewhere along the way, the basketball world let one replace the other.
Now, when word of Guerin's comments started spreading through basketball circles in 2025, the reaction was immediate. And it was split right down the middle in a way that very few conversations about LeBron ever are. On one side, you had former players, guys who'd competed in different eras, who understood what Guerin was really saying, nodding quietly. Not rushing to cameras, not posting tweets, just nodding. Because some things in this sport are understood without being spoken. On the other side, complete fury. LeBron's fan base mobilized within hours. Social media became a war zone. Hashtags trended. People who'd never heard the name Richie Guerin in their lives were suddenly experts on why he was wrong, why he was jealous, why he was irrelevant. And that reaction, that speed, is exactly what Guerin said would happen. He reportedly told someone close to him that the moment his comments got out, the machine would activate, that there would be a coordinated effort to bury the conversation under noise and outrage before anyone had a chance to actually think about what was being said. He wasn't wrong. Within 48 hours, 3 different high-profile media personalities had published pieces calling Guerin outdated and out of touch. None of them engaged with the actual substance of his argument. They attacked the man. They didn't address the message. And if you know anything about how PR damage control works, that's not a coincidence. That's a playbook. Now here's where the story takes a turn that even the people defending LeBron had trouble explaining. Within a week of Guerin's comments circulating, and remember, this hasn't been picked up by the major sports networks yet. This is still largely moving through underground basketball communities and private circles. A response started to take shape. Not from LeBron directly. LeBron didn't say a word publicly. But the people around him, they got busy. Statements were shaped. Narratives were redirected. Interviews were quietly arranged with friendly outlets to talk about LeBron's impact and generational greatness, all conveniently timed to drown out the conversation Guerin had started. And here's what Guerin said about that response that absolutely floored people who heard it. He said, And again, this is coming from someone who has been inside professional basketball longer than most current players have been alive. He said, "The fact that his team responded the way they did proves exactly what I said. A man with a real legacy doesn't need a crisis team. The game speaks for itself." Read that again. Let it sit. Because whether you love LeBron or think the criticism is valid, that's a devastating line. And it's hard to argue with the logic. So, where does all of this leave us? The GOAT debate in basketball has always been messy. It's always been emotional. And it's always been about more than just numbers and rings, no matter how much people pretend otherwise. It's about meaning. It's about what we want the greatest player of all time to represent. Richie Guerin's argument, at its core, is that LeBron James redefined what greatness means in basketball, but not in the way his supporters claim. He didn't elevate the standard. He lowered the bar for what we accept as legendary, and then raised the volume on the marketing until nobody could hear the difference anymore. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable part of this whole conversation. Because if Guerin is right, the problem isn't really LeBron. The problem is us, the fans, the media, the culture that was so hungry for the next Michael Jordan that we collectively agreed to stop asking hard questions. LeBron is an extraordinary athlete. Nobody serious is disputing that. But extraordinary athlete and manufactured legacy are not mutually exclusive. And in 2025, with the GOAT debate more heated than it's ever been, Richie Guerin, a 60-plus year basketball veteran with nothing left to prove and nothing left to lose, decided the truth was worth more than the silence. Was he right?